from a ministry standpoint, that was a lot of what we wanted to do. And we were trying to do things that everyone would want to go to, like the fashion and art shows and music and stuff, was just to make it better and doing it in a way that was community focused, people focused. And, there was an impact element from a ministry standpoint that came out of that for sure. Lives were changed and stuff, but really we were just trying to make the city better. And so from that is where really the roots of what Moniker.
Welcome everyone to the Kingdom REI podcast. This is your host, Ellis Hammond, and this is the podcast show where I interview kingdom leaders really passionate and ambitious for business and for the kingdom. And we have an incredible guest on here with us today, Mr. Ryan Sisson. How are you, brother?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
If you don't know Ryan, he is definitely, if not already, a San Diego up and coming legend. You can't you can't go too many places in this city and not see something that his hand, his brain, his mind, his creativity hasn't touched. And whatever he touches, he turns to something of beauty. He creates just a ton of awesome spaces here in San Diego that thousands of people, I think, use daily, weekly. In terms of event places, coffee shops. So personally, I have benefited from his influence and his reputation here in San Diego. So it's an honor to have you on, brother. How are you, man?
Doing pretty good. Been an early morning with the kiddos at home, but that's just as part of the season of life that we're in right now.
7-month, right? And a 4-year-old?
Yeah, 7-month and an almost 4-year-old. And for whatever reason, the 4-year-old decided she wanted to be ready for the day to start at 4:45 this morning.
It's not like a dog. Like we're a month from having a kid, and a dog, I can be like, hey, just be quiet, like keep sleeping. You can't really do that with a 4-year-old.
That's my favorite part is when like young couples are like, oh yeah, we got a dog. And it's almost like a kid. It is not an I'm sorry, but yeah. So,
dude, well, I'm glad you made it here, man. I know I'm a couple cups of coffee in. So, Ryan, I'm excited for the show. I've been looking forward to a long time. I'm so grateful that we got to meet each other because, I've heard about Moniker, but didn't always know who the brains, the man, the dream behind it was. And so I'm excited for this because you have such a dream and a heart for community and real estate, because you're an investor, you're doing deals, yet you also have this real eye and vision for creating spaces and community around real estate, and you've turned that into a business model. And so I'm really excited to just kind of get into that story because a lot of our audience are real estate investors. And so just even kind of thinking not just about how we acquire real estate, but how do we use and adapt that for kingdom purposes, like building community and creating beautiful spaces. And so man, before we get into this and before we pray, can you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself and kind of where you are today and what Moniker is, and then we can back up into the story a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm a third generation San Diegan. So as you mentioned about San Diego, I've not only lived here my whole life, but family has just some pretty deep roots. My wife grew up in Point Loma, so our little kids are 4th generation San Diegans, which is really cool and very unique.
Which is like, for the way, by anyone's listening, like 4th generation San Diego, like it's like you're from Mars almost. Like that's so rare because people, there's such a transient city.
Totally. And I think that's, something I recognized pretty early on, was watching kind of friends transition after college into other parts of the country to feel like they needed to go and be a part of whatever community existed over there, whether it was like a Brooklyn or Nashville or Austin or somewhere I would call cooler or hipper or just more in tune with the creative and the dreamers and the artists and all those things. And, my heart being for this city was beginning to take shape around this idea of like, why I know why they're not staying, but why has no one created a place for them to feel like they could stay? San Diego is known for beaches and sunshine, which is not a bad thing to be known for. It's a wonderful place to live. But I always saw it as a bit of like a blank canvas, like waiting to be identified as something more than just that. I think there's a lot happening here, and there has been a pretty deep community of dreamers and creatives that have never really been recognized because people couldn't see past the weather. And so it really started a lot in that trajectory as far as like how we got to where we're at. And I think then the other side of it was um, this expression of ministry that involved creating spaces for people to come together, and not just on Sundays. So, my background, I grew up in church, and in college, I was helped develop and lead the young adult ministry at one of the big churches here in San Diego. And in that, we were given resources, opportunities to go and do things that I think most, young adult ministries would be able to do. And we took that and we created art shows and fashion shows and weekly music, and we did it in the city. We didn't do it at the church. And one of our co-founders and one of my closest friends, he's a pastor in La Jolla. His name's Mingo. He was a young adult pastor at the time. And, his thing was, Jesus's ministry was so much done at temples and wells, right? And temples are a place that people go and they went for like formal teaching. It was a place that really was exclusive because it really was only about the people that wanted to be there. Yeah, it might, we could argue that everyone could go, but the reality is like our churches, and we've not only have we perfected temples, right? We have the most state-of-the-art this and the science behind, why people, worship certain ways or whatever. It's not a bad thing. It's not a knock on it. But it's only part of the place where you can impact people. And so the other side is the wells, and the wells were the place that everyone went to for their daily interaction, their daily sustenance. That was where the political conversations took place. It's where the markets were. That's where the water was. That was where the normal life, regular life happened. And so our heart was always, how do we go to the wells and create a place for the church to exist that isn't building a temple on top of it, right? This wasn't about planting another church on top of the well. This was literally just going and making the well better because that's what we're called to do. Just regardless of whether it added people to the temple or not, whether it raised money or not, didn't matter. It was how do we just make the well better? And so from a ministry standpoint, that was a lot of what we wanted to do. And we were trying to do things that everyone would want to go to, like the fashion and art shows and music and stuff, was just to make it better and doing it in a way that was community focused, people focused. And, there was an impact element from a ministry standpoint that came out of that for sure. Lives were changed and stuff, but really we were just trying to make the city better. And so from that is where really the roots of what Moniker, like Genesis is.
Wow.
And
I love that story, man. I love that,
yeah,
like temples and wells. Like that either needs to be a song or we need to create something from that right there, man. I really like that a lot. So temples and wells. Well, I didn't actually know all that story. I love that vision of just making the well better. And you're totally right. Like I always say San Diego, even though it's an older city, it's still underdeveloped, underutilized, underappreciated, which is great because we actually appreciate the lack of
yeah,
traffic we have here in our city for a big city. But there's so much potential I think this city still has that you have brought to life in so many ways. Just quickly, in terms of where Moniker is today, in terms of spaces, people that it serves on a weekly or monthly basis, can you share about kind of where it is
yeah.
today?
Yeah, so we took that need for creating space and with ministry to, one of the biggest challenges we always had was finding a physical venue to be able to do these things in. And that led into getting our first actual home, which was an old warehouse in East Village that we still lease today and have an event venue there and a couple different tenants and actually ministries and nonprofits that work out of there. But that was our first foray into like a physical environment that Moniker was creating. And we had all kinds of stuff through that space over the years. We've had that location for going on 9 years now. But that just was really the beginning of um, just creating more intentional environments for people to come together, right? So our next step from there was creating Moniker General, which is our coffee shop, retail store, and cocktail bar in Liberty Station. Well, and that spun off of the opportunity to do a co-working space across the street from Moniker General called Moniker Commons. So now we have a co-working space, which General opened 5 years ago, Commons opened 4 years ago. And then that led into a couple more event venues. So we have a wedding venue in Liberty Station. We just opened one in downtown on the waterfront called Lane. And then we moved our headquarters from our warehouse in downtown to Liberty Station as well. So in Liberty Station, we occupied 4 buildings. I would say probably about 40 to 50,000 square feet. And then we have a 8,000 square foot wedding venue called the Lane on downtown on Harbor Drive. And then our warehouse is about 16,000 square feet in East Village. So, our footprint has grown tremendously over the years, and we've just continued to create businesses that allow us to bring people together. It's set the table for community to take place and stand back and kind of watch what happens.
Love it.
And then the last piece of that is we have an interior design and fabrication studio that does all of our work internally for us, and as well as client like hospitality design, residential, office. And that really was the beginning of the business. But so we can literally like create the spaces to the way that we want them, and really the way that we feel like
Cool.
which is it's really, that's a really special piece of
I
this.
would, encourage folks like just take a moment and go to, what's your website? Moniker, that one is
MonikerGroup.com.
Moniker what?
MonikerGroup.com.
MonikerGroup.com. Just go look at some of their spaces as you get into this episode, because like you'll get an idea of what we mean by just creating something beautiful. Your team does an amazing job. Ryan, I want to get in your story. I want to pray first and just ask God to bless this time. What a great intro for all of this, man. But let me just pray as we always do, and then we can get into this time. God, I'm so grateful for Ryan and making this time, and for his kiddos, for getting them up early, and what a blessing. But yet, I'm sure that is hard. So thanks for that. But I pray that you give us both energy, clarity, and focus to really be able to serve everyone who's listening and serve you, God the King, is why we do this. And may that be our main focus. And for those who are listening, may this inspire, encourage, even challenge, uplift, to really create and dream about doing something big for the cities that they live in, for creating great wells for people to gather and create ministry opportunities. So to you be the glory, God. We give you thanks in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
So, Ryan, here's the question I want to ask you, kind of going back before Moniker. Like, what were the turning points in your life, and maybe it doesn't have to be that significant, but that led you to be a dreamer, a creator? Like what was that? What were some of the key points, or maybe even relationships that kind of created who you are today?
Yeah, I think, growing up, I was a Lego kid, like just obsessed with Legos. Man, I love to just break things down and build things back. And I would
Mhm.
create houses and little towns, and like I was always just kind of naturally creating spaces, even if they were fictional spaces. But so I think, from a standpoint of just kind of the core of who I was created to be, I think that's as far back as I can remember. And then going through in high school, I was part of the ASB team that put on the dances and put on the assemblies, and kind of like I was continually kind of found my way in my story with wherever I was, that was about creating environments and experiences for other people. So high school, moved into college, and then college I got involved in the young adult ministry, and I was helping put on the weekly gatherings, and then that moved into doing these art shows and these fashion shows, and then that moved into warehouse. So it was like seasonally, like no matter where I was creating something, whether it be for fake plastic people or for like young adults in all of San Diego. So the I don't know if there was ever like a turning point. There was never like an aha point, and that's really how God really is more. The way that He works in my life is really more of like a true development. I've never really had like any sort of like edge of cliff, like big revelation, like big turn type stuff. It's just been this like gradual process towards this ever developing kind of dream that's always sitting out in front of me. And that dream continues to take shape as I continue to do things, which makes it a little bit frustrating because it's always like chasing a rainbow. It's just always like a little bit further ahead. But the reality is like He's just always kind of led me gradually into the things that we've done. And my involvement with the guys that helped found Moniker was really friendships that turned into opportunities to empower them to exist in the gifts and talents that they were created to be. Right. I mean, I had I was surrounded by a creative community, yet I would not consider myself a creative at that time in a traditional sense, right? I didn't paint, I didn't build things, I didn't shoot photos, I didn't shoot video. And I found myself very envious of a lot of people that did, because it just felt they were so intentional, like behind their purpose. Like it felt like they had such a clear purpose. And so what I started to do is I started to just be the person that helped them be able to do that. Like I took my very clearly generalist role. I'm not really great at anything. I just am kind of good at a bunch of things. It's kind of even like growing up as a like playing sports. Like I was never the first pick, but pick a sport and I was playing it. So it was like, okay, my role and opportunity isn't about what I produce. It's about what I cultivate, right? Like I cultivate a space for other people to be successful in their very specific talents. And that's really Moniker as a whole. Like now we have 8 companies. I have 3 different business partners. We have about 50 employees, and I am not capable. Like I don't know how to pull a shot at the coffee bar. I don't know how to build a couch or a table. There's a lot of things I don't know. But what I do know is I know how to make sure that the people that are really good at those things have what they need to be successful. So yeah, so it's really just been this kind of like development, and where we are now is, I think the cool part is that so much of our story, if not the entire story, is built off of relationships and the opportunities that come through those relationships. And I think that's just a way that God both, it's cool because he created me in a way that would recognize the value in that, but he also created me in a way that is like uh, opportunistic, in a sense of like I can do something like, and then I get value out of that. So I get both reward and opportunity out of watching things come through these relationships. And there's not enough time on the podcast to tell you how that's all like played out with all the different spaces that we have and the businesses that we started, but it's really been that, and I recognize so much of how he's worked in it through those things.
Who was a big who for you early on? I mean, who was an example for you before you became who you are, what Moniker became what it is? Like, was there a specific who really had a huge influence on your life?
Like from a peer level, personal level, or like from just like a person I never met
Um,
before.
yeah, it could be just a person of influence, but that really kind of maybe help shape, mold, even inspire some of the things you're creating today.
Yeah, I think I could probably answer more on the peer level. So I was really connected to a community that ran an organization called Invisible Children. It was a nonprofit, still is a nonprofit, but back in like kind of 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, they were doing some incredible advocacy work over in Uganda, based using the power of film and storytelling.
Right.
And the founders, Jason and Bobby and Laren, and all the guys that they put together on that team were honestly super inspiring. Watching what they were doing, and it was really relationships that came out of that originally. That was the like pre-genesis of what Moniker is. And so I would say like early on, it was watching them create something out of nothing, and create this movement in a way that's never been done before. And being able to be like front row seat and pseudo involved in some of it. And that was really influential in the very beginning, like pre like official start of Moniker. And I think from a standpoint of you know someone I've never met before, but actually it'd be Richard Branson. So what he's created with Virgin Group was very empowering to me. There's a lot of conglomerates, and there's not a lot that have the same brand that they've taken and scaled out to all these different ventures. And he's really one that I read, I think every book he has, and read case studies on their company. And it was very empowering and like kind of permission giving to go, if he can do it, then why can't we do it?
Yeah,
Like, and
I
so,
love that.
yeah, I've never met him, but I feel like the story, the work that he's done specifically from a business standpoint has been very inspiring, and very like, okay, let's go, let's try this out.
Doesn't he have a great book
He's got like 8 books.
about
Uh,
that? Have you read any of them?
yeah, I've read most of them.
What do you recommend? Like, if I want to go study his company, his journey, like what would be inspiring, or even kind of
So his 2 main books is, the first one is called Losing My Virginity, and the second one's called Finding My Virginity, which is typical Richard Branson book titles, but just the story of how that business came to life and just the pivots that took place. It's just wild, like going from a student magazine to a recording studio to a Atlantic, or international airline. Like, it's just like, I love it. I absolutely love that. And I love the fact that he's created a brand that can just be attached to so many things. And we have, I think 9 or 10 expressions of Moniker from a brand standpoint here. And with, dozens more in my dream tank, but, and I just think it's cool. It's just kind
I
of
love it.
fun.
I'm gonna go check those out. All
Yeah.
right, so I want to ask you some questions from just a business standpoint because pretty interesting what you've created. So first question I want to talk about is like how do you go? There's a little bit of the how, right? That I think people really enjoy. Because you talked a little bit about you got the first one here in East Village, which by the way, I live in East Village. I want to talk to you about that space offline. um, but concept, like going from concept to profit. Can you talk about what that looked like? You had the idea, and then you made it profitable. Like I want to talk about this in stages, but let's start there from like how you went from concept to really making profit early on.
Um, do I have to did I have to make profit?
I mean, yeah, maybe like I mean, but how did you begin to actually build a business out of this? Like where to go from concept to profit?
Well, I say that it took about 25% hard work, 50% faith, and 25% pure ignorance that's gotten us to where we are. There's a lot of things that we've done that we didn't know any better. And I think, believing in what we think we could do is really what had pushed us through to be able to create businesses that are still around. We have so many different businesses that really it's hard to say like answer that in one way. Like, I'll be honest, like running event venues, making profit on like wedding venues is easy. Like we've done very well. It's high margin, really busy. We've created a great palette, but for people want, but it's for us there, it's really more about just creating a great space and then kind of like letting people do with it what they please. On the other side, to become profitable, like on the food and beverage side with like coffee, has been just hard. We kind of approached initially, I think, the mentality of like, if we make more money, we'll make more money. And we realized that just because we're good builders, we're not good, doesn't mean we're going to be good operators. And so being good builders for us is natural. Creating spaces for people, starting new things, like that just is what we do. But being able to manage a company well so that it actually is financially successful is not natural for us. And so it's taken a lot of time and energy for us to actually, and intention to become financially successful on the bottom line with some of the companies. And that's involved a lot of research, a lot of work, some different programs that we might use to manage staffing or manage cost of goods, or and just trial and error, and like, how do we get this down? And being willing to like care about 1% here and 1% there, like 1% less on the cost of goods, or 2% less on the staff costs. And so it's really, for us to become sustainable as a business, has really been about going against what we're naturally inclined to do and spending time figuring out how to be successful in managing our expenses, which is really the operational side. And that's been wildly like a game changer for us. And that's not something that we've arrived at by any means. Like, we are still digging in. We're in the process of implementing some new frameworks for our like operational. There's a book called Traction, and they present an entrepreneurial operating system, an EOS, and we're going to be implementing that across all 8 of our businesses, starting with our parent company, Moniker Group, and then working our way through. And that's going to start to build more structure into how we're managing our 1, 3, 10-year goals, our issues and rocks and things that keep us from being successful or help us to be successful. So, in the very beginning, it's honestly, the way that we made it work is just a crap ton of hustle, like just grinding and figuring it out and putting my personal paychecks into the company from my other business that I was working at while running Moniker, and to make it keep it going. And it was a total hustle.
Right.
And then as we've crossed over into like a more mature state as a business, now that we're going on 11 years, it's really been about refinement and kind of maturing the way that we manage our businesses versus just like, let's keep hustling for more business or more clients or more customers. So it really hasn't been anything specific. It's kind of a generic answer, but it's trying to encompass all the different businesses we do. That's kind of the broad.
Well, no, I think that's really interesting. Like, you know, a dreamer, a creator, like you guys are creating, you're spending all this money, you're doing all this thing, and like then you got to start worrying about profit. You know, like, oh no, we actually need to be profitable. So, how important is cash flow in terms? I mean, that you focus on or you look at from a CEO standpoint? I always like to ask this question: like, how important is cash flow for you?
Yeah, so we don't have a CFO, so I fill that role. We have office manager that does like all our bookkeeping stuff, and then we have a financial analyst that provides a lot of like the more like data and stuff that we need to make decisions. I would say cash flow is the only thing that is completely required of me to keep the company going, in the sense of like everything else I do, the company could function without me. But I manage cash flow and making sure that businesses have what they need to keep going. Like that's the most vital thing that I do. I mean, long term on a day-to-day basis, right? Setting vision and leading our company and stuff is obviously like my top priority, but day to day, cash flow is king. And so I have, we have 8 entities. So I have 8 entities worth of cash flow to manage. There's pretty significant revenue that gets passed through different companies depending on the structure of those businesses or depending on how they support each other. But they also all have completely different revenue streams. Some are, more seasonal. Others, some are more like weekends are better than not. And, like there's always the dynamic, nothing's consistent. So at any point, it's like having a bunch of kids. Like it's like one is always going to be needy. Like there's always at least one that's needy when it comes to cash flow. So I probably am better at it than I would ever, than I know. I think if I saw, a simple cash flow model for a business, it would probably surprise me about how complex ours is. But at the same time, I've been doing it for so long, it's just it's what I do. So yeah, it's a beast. It's creative cash flow is the reason why we still exist today.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's huge. Cash flow is king. We talk about that a lot being in real estate. So, couple questions here as we get close to the end. You're on your site, your motto or your manifesto. It's really amazing. I love reading it. I actually read it several times before our interview just because it's inspiring. But you end with to dream a better world, and then to build it. Kind of feels like that's what it encapsulates the manifesto itself. So my question around is like, what do you dream for San Diego, man? What is your dream? I mean, you said you got a dream bucket or dream file that you can't bring out yet, but as you look at the landscape of San Diego, like what is your dream for this place, man?
Yeah, it's interesting. That last line of that manifesto is something that we actually just have adapted into our new overall mission statement for the company. It hasn't been like formalized yet, but we kind of tweaked it a little bit. We added the word responsibility, like this idea of this responsibility to go and build it. It's like it's one thing to just have ideas, but the responsibility gives you ownership to actually create those things that you have, and understanding like that what it is that you create has an influence impact on the world around you. So
That I love, man. Like if we can do it, then we have the responsibility, the
yeah,
obligation to do
exactly.
it, right? Absolutely.
So
I love that. It's
and
huge.
so I just presented that to the team actually a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be kind of using that as a guiding post towards all the other stuff that we're kind of working on with our 10-year and stuff. But my dream for San Diego is really similar to really my dream for really anyone. It's like I want to see it become the best version of itself. What I don't want to see is I don't want to see San Diego become the next whatever, right? The next Austin or the next San Jose or the next San Francisco or whatever. I just want to see it become a fullest version of what San Diego's intended to be. And I think we're the 8th largest city in America. We're not irrelevant, but we're super approachable. I think that's what makes this place special, is that you get that element of like big city, but you get the culture of a small town. And it has, in my opinion, has a very open ecosystem as far as like people being willing to support each other to be successful. And I think I would love to just continue to facilitate that. I'd love to be known as a company or a person that is out there trying to help others be successful, even if they like would like threaten like our business. It's like being able to cheer people on, because I know one of our kind of biggest models is a rising tide lifts all ships, and so we would prefer to be part of rising the tide in our city and watching everybody become elevated than just try to promote ourselves above everybody else. So, um, I think I've seen a lot of what I love to see in San Diego over the last like 10 years. I love, the creativity of the culinary space and the coffee shops that we now have. I love, the architecture and the creative mornings, just watching that take off and hundreds of people come every month to be a part and be connected. There's more like cool event venues. There's a lot of really cool like physical spaces that have come to life. And really a city, so much of a city is a physical environment. And so I think I'm seeing that. And I think it's just a matter of continuing to add to that in the best way that we know how. So that's a big piece of it, like the kind of the physical interaction with it. And I think that's where like the real estate and placemaking really comes into play. And then the other part is just the health of the individuals that are part of our city. We have most of our influence is on people that work for our company. So we really spend a lot of time figuring out how we invest and develop those individuals for as long as we have them, 6 months or 30 years. Like we feel like we have that responsibility to help them grow closer to who they were created to be. But then also outside the walls of our company, right? How are we impacting and influencing those individuals? Creating spaces for them to come together is a big part of that. But is there more that we can do? So, that's, I just love to see it be the healthiest version of itself. I think is really what it comes down to. And I think you could probably a lot of different opinions of what that looks like, but for me, it's about great places and healthy individuals that fill them, and a lot of cool creative fruit would come out of that type of environment.
Yeah, I think it's a great explanation of San Diego. Ryan, to wrap it up, you're in the hospitality, you're in the retail, you're in the restaurant business. We're in the midst of probably the hardest, time for all three of those industries. Not to dig the knife too deep, because I know you're just really trying to lead your team through this, but I'm curious to think, like, for you to, what are you preparing for? Where do you see things heading? Folks who are in this space or investors in this space, I don't know, like, what are the opportunities that will come out of this, and how fast will we go back to normal? That, how, like, what are you seeing? Are you seeing people really flood back to these things? What will be the next opportunity? How much of this landscape will change across retail, hospitality, restaurants, for example, and how much will be different, and what does that opportunity look like?
Yeah. So, try to remember all the different thoughts that just popped in my head. Our last March was like the shutdown, right? And we went from everything was just humming to just vacant, basically. We kept our coffee bar open with a couple of people just serving coffees to go for 20 or 30 people that would come through in a day versus the 350 customers a day that we do now. But when we started seeing things reopen, and I think the biggest example is like if you look at just our coffee sales, our best month ever was February of 2020, right before things shut down. Our That was until October of 2020 when things reopened for like a month. We had that like month period where stuff was open, and we just annihilated with customers. It was awesome, and everything got shut down again. But I think that's a really like a interesting little case study. But just like, hey, go out and be in the community, go out and be connected, and people just flock to it. And we've seen that again since we've been reopening here in San Diego and California more gradually. We've seen like a pretty steady week over week. And honestly, our coffee shop and retail store, we just had our best off holiday retail month ever in 5 years. Our coffee shop was just slammed. We just upgraded from a 2 head to a 3 head espresso machine because we can't keep up with the line. I was just there. It's Wednesday, 10 o'clock, and I was just over there, and there was a line at the door. And so what I'm seeing is that people want to be connected and they want to be together. They want to be out. They want to be around others. And I'm not surprised at all because I believe that's who we were created to be. Like we were created to be in community with one another. Like that was like Genesis, like Adam was alone. Like, and God was like, man, I need to make someone for him because he's just not at his best without somebody else. So like from the very beginning of time, like we were intended to be together. And so I think the value for creating space for people to be together is higher than it ever has been. I think that we're going to see an influx of individuals that took for granted everything that they had and had access to. And I think that the level of appreciation and value will increase. I also think that they might be more selective in where they're because of when you become more aware of what you have, you typically use it differently, right? You don't take it for granted. So I would argue that there's potential for experiences that people are looking for experiences that they might not have had prior. So they might be looking for something that's a little bit more um, I don't know, a little more fun or a little more creative or a little more like just versus just like, oh, I'm gonna like we're free. I'm just gonna run down to, Starbucks. I mean, so no, I want to go to the place where everybody's like really gathering, where everyone's like feeling connected with others. It feels like that. So, I think we were already seeing an interesting shift in the retail side before this. There's Seth Godin says there's a race to the top and a race to the bottom. And the race to the bottom is cheaper, quicker, like easier, right? So that's Amazon, that's Target, that's Walmart. The race to the top is art. It's an experience. It's something that you're going to remember beyond the product that you buy. The middle is what's dead and dying. That's J.C. Penney and Sears and like all these guys, Sports Authority that just you could like they're not giving me an experience that I want to go to, and I can get all that stuff delivered to my doorstep for half the price. So I think we are already seeing that shift, and I would imagine this would perpetuate that. So we've
Wow,
always found,
that's a great example. The top, the bottom, and the middle, and what we see going out of business more and more.
yeah,
That's really insightful.
yeah. So that's we land in the world of what we would consider art and experience, and so
Mm.
that's we feel good and excited about what we're creating and the intentionality behind it and how people will have gravitated towards it, and will continue to gravitate towards it as we go forward.
Man, I love that, dude. Let's do an event soon, man. We were talking kind of beforehand. I really want to bring our community, man, to this great city and experience what you've put together. So let's keep talking about that.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun. We got plenty of places to do it.
Ryan, I've loved this, man. Thanks for making the time. Anything else you would add before we get out of here?
Mm, I think I've struggled a lot through this last year. I'm a dreamer, right? I like to think about what could be and pursue what's ahead. And for most of what the last 12, 13 months has held, it's just felt like this anchor on my dreams, right? This idea of like holding me back and keeping me from all the stuff that I wanted to do. And I think it's probably about a month ago. I just felt like God just like spoke into my life and said, all those dreams you had are only possible by what you've gone through in the last year. Like where you've been and what you've done and what you've accomplished or like overcome is a requirement for what I have for you next. And so it kind of changed the narrative for me of like this kind of victim element of like this screwed up so much stuff to wow, I'm so glad that we went through it because I needed that to be able to go where what's next. And this felt like it's been really encouraging to me and it just felt like it's been giving me a lot of permission to view what we've gone through differently, and then be excited because I know our saying inside the office is never waste a good crisis, but I know from a faith perspective, God rarely ever wastes a good crisis with an individual that is willing to embrace it and continue to kind of lay out stuff at his feet. So I'm looking forward to what he has in store. And I just feel like that's been a really just powerful kind of word in my life over the last couple of months.
Don't waste a good crisis. Man, that's awesome. Ryan, Monikergroup.com, Moniker group.com is where people can go to learn more about Moniker. Come check out the spaces if they come to San Diego. Um, how can people, if they want to follow you or get, look to, I don't know, maybe even tell your story a little bit more, how can they get in touch with you?
Yes, totally. So, Instagram, I think we have like 12 Instagram accounts. So just type in Moniker and just pick one if you're interested in following something. The website's good. It's got some info. And then you can reach me via email, just ryan@monikergroup.com. That's the best way to get a hold of me, and happy to just go back and forth on anything that anyone want to just chat through. So
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Loved having you, brother. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks
Thanks.
everyone. We'll see you next week.